What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Back again for the second time today, actually. Earlier, dropped a video talking all about the Terry Rozier trade going over to the Miami Heat, which if you want to hear my thoughts on that, make sure to go check that video out. But just a few hours later, in the midst of all the trade deadline drama, rumor, news, reports, we've got a coaching change, and it's not the one that I would have expected going into the season. If you ask me who is going to be fired right around this time of year, I would have named probably 15 to 20 coaches before this guy, because right now, his team's in the midst of a 30-13 season. They're the second seed in the Eastern Conference, but even still, Adrian Griffin has been fired as the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, a move that's probably stunning to a lot of more casual fans out there, people that haven't watched the Bucks so far this season, just more general sports fans who look at their record and say, this team's 30-13, why are they firing their head coach? I had a few people actually text me and say, what are the Bucks doing? Why did they fire their coach? And to be honest, it's probably the right move. I have not been impressed at all by Adrian Griffin as the head coach, regardless of what the record says. The team has been pretty underwhelming so far this season. I've made a couple of videos about the Bucks already this season, and the general synopsis of both of those is that, hey, the Bucks record looks pretty good, but when you take a look at the on-court product and actually watch the games, it's not nearly as impressive as you would expect. They're not this juggernaut that I thought they would be. A team that has Giannis, Dame, Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton should be blowing out a lot of teams theoretically and having their stars sit the fourth quarter. Instead, they're often in dogfights against teams way worse than them. The Detroit Pistons are a good example of that. They barely beat them twice this week. One of those games gave up over 140 points to the Detroit Pistons without Cade Cunningham even in the lineup, which is part of the defense that they've been struggling with this season. They're the 22nd ranked defense in the NBA up to this point. Obviously, losing Drew Holiday is going to hurt your defense, but even still, you've still got Giannis, you've still got Brook Lopez. You should be able to be a decent defense and turn up when you need to. They've rarely shown an ability to do that. A lot of that is the scheming from Adrian Griffin, which I haven't been impressed with at all so far. I haven't loved the fluidity of the offense, even though they're one of the better offensive teams in the league. It feels like it could be so much better. It just seems like so far this season, the team has willed themselves to victory based on talent, based on the fact that they've got Giannis and they've got Dame. It doesn't feel like they're ever out scheming teams. They're never out coaching teams. They're just winning off sheer talent. And that's going to work when you play some of the worst teams in the regular season. But when you get to the playoffs against like the Celtics or the Sixers, that's not going to fly. Now, these struggles aren't all Adrian Griffin's fault. Like, you take a look at the backcourt defensively in Dame and Malik Beasley, it's not exactly going to get you many stops. The bench is also pretty thin defensively. The personnel isn't fantastic, but even still, there is a recipe here to optimize these guys, one that has been presented to him, and he just refused to employ it. You take a look at what the Bucks did last season with Brook Lopez and Giannis, how they used those guys to make themselves one of the better defenses in the NBA, specifically with Brook turning him into a top 3 depoy candidate, and Adrian Griffin completely changed up the system from last year. He just scrapped it completely. And there was one point during the season where they're playing and they're getting torched, and the Bucks players went over to Adrian Griffin and said, hey, can we please play the defense we played last year? And I think they ended up winning that game. They started utilizing it, and things started to get better. Like, how do you take a look at what they did last year and just completely get rid of it? And this is just one of many different things that apparently have gone on in the Bucks locker room over the course of the season. Chris Haynes put out an entire article with Bleacher Report right before I recorded this video that detailed a bunch of different stuff that happened throughout the year. Apparently there were a number of players meetings multiple times where the players came to him and asked him to change things up, aired out grievances. I know at one point Dame had a lot of problems with his rotation, so he went to Adrian Griffin and said, hey, I don't want to play these minutes. Let me change things up. Adrian Griffin, to his credit, took the player's suggestions like, okay, cool. But this has happened over and over and over again, and still things have not gotten better. He still is making the same mistakes. It doesn't seem like he knows what he's doing out there. Apparently he completely lost the respect of the guys in the locker room. He's had some very questionable decisions with rotations and who plays down the stretch of which games. Even on the offensive end, where they've been really good so far this season, it still feels like a lot is being left on the table. It's just kind of clunky. It changes from night to night what they're playing, what schemes they're running. It still doesn't feel like they quite know that, hey, you could just probably run a Dame and Giannis pick and roll most of the time and destroy teams. When the trade happened, everybody in the world was like, how do you stop a Dame and Giannis pick and roll? And it took them forever to actually start running that as one of the main parts of their offense. I don't blame them at all for firing him. And honestly, I give them credit for making the decision to fire him right now, because they could have waited till the end of the season and might have wasted a playoff run with this core group of guys who are getting up there in age. While Giannis is still a little bit younger, Chris Middleton is noticeably starting to regress a little bit. Brook Lopez is nearing his 40s. Dame doesn't have probably a lot longer as one of the best players in the world. He's even been struggling so far this season, which is something else I think Adrian Griffin has struggled with, acclimating Dame to the system. they need to go ahead and win titles now with this group. So by firing Adrian Griffin this early on in the season, they're saying, okay, we know this thing isn't going to work. We're going to cut our losses. We're going to admit we got it wrong and go out there and find someone else to try and fix this thing right now. And whoever they bring in as the head coach isn't going to have a lot of time. They're going to have less than half a season to fix this thing. But at the least, it's not like 20 or 15 games down the stretch of the year, which the Bucks could have waited till. They are trying to salvage the season, so I give them credit for that. But what I don't give them credit for is the lead coaching candidate that's out there right now, because apparently the guy that they're kind of zeroing in on to be their next head coach is Doc Rivers. And I gotta be honest, I hate the idea of Doc Rivers coming in to coach this team. I know he's won a championship. I know they want someone with experience, which I think makes sense to bring in a coach with experience halfway through the season. Throwing a new head coach into this fire right now would be a terrible decision if you ask me. But like Doc Rivers, I know the coaching market out there isn't phenomenal right now because the season is halfway over, but you're going to go for a guy that has consistently led teams to underperforming seasons to help out your underperforming team. A team that last year disappointed in the playoffs. You're going to pick up a coach who is known for disappointing in the playoffs and blowing 3-1 leads. Like, come on. How is this the coaching candidate that you're immediately going for? Also, something weird going on. Apparently, Doc Rivers was like consulting with Adrian Griffin partway through the season, even a couple of weeks ago, leading up to him getting fired. So that's kind of strange. Maybe some sabotage going on? Probably not. But even still, I just don't like Doc Rivers as the signing for this team. He's good at managing personalities, which it seems like this team might need a little bit of, but if you're looking for a coach that's going to out-scheme the best teams in the Eastern Conference, Doc Rivers is not going to be your guy. I mean, you take a look at the Sixers, one of the Bucks' biggest rivals in the East right now. Take a look at them last year under Doc Rivers and take a look at them under Nick Nurse right now. As someone who watches a lot of Sixers games, it is completely night and day between those two teams. And some of that is progression from Tyrese Maxey, a better supporting cast, the rise of Embiid. But I think Embiid playing better at the best level we've ever seen him at, one of the best center seasons of all time. Part of that is because of the system Nick Nurse has put into place. The team looks a lot more cohesive. They have an identity, something that it didn't feel like they almost ever had under Doc Rivers. It feels like they're just name chasing rather than going out there to try and find the best coach for the job. Some other names that Chris Haynes mentioned in the article include Jeff Van Gundy and Nate McMillan, and I don't love either of those options either, so maybe there's just not a lot of good coaches out there at the moment, because again, it is halfway through the season that this is happening to them. But yeah, it's been a way more tumultuous season than I thought it was going to be for the Milwaukee Bucks. They've got to find a new head coach. It seems like it's going to be Doc Rivers. I guess we'll see how that experiment goes. But for right now, I appreciate you all watching. Let me know down below in the comments what your thoughts are on this situation. They also need to make some trades. Like, just firing your head coach isn't going to fix this. They've got to find a way to reshape this roster a little bit at the deadline despite having limited assets. We'll see what they manage to do. Maybe it's like someone on the buyout market like a PJ Tucker or something like that. But for the moment, they're trying things with the new head coach. We'll see how it looks leading up to the deadline, assuming it is Doc Rivers. Let me know what you think about that signing down below in the comments. If there's any other coaches you'd like to see them hire instead, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. But yeah, for right now, I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I'll see y'all later. Real One Say back.